Welcome to Your School Journey, where we dive into the topics that matter in education today. We're here to help parents understand the conversations happening in schools and offer tips to support your child's learning along the way.
Okay, so welcome to another episode of Your School Journey. Today we're joined by Brett Moller, Director of Knowledge Services and Creative Industries at St Andrews Anglican College on the Sunshine Coast. And we're talking about the role technology plays in the education space. Welcome to the podcast, Brett.
Thanks for having me, Mel.
So, Brett, can you give me a little bit of insight? I've known you for quite a while, but our listeners probably need a little bit more insight into your current role. And Director of Knowledge Services is a fairly broad term. So can you tell us what you do?
Yeah, sure, Mel. So I'm a teacher of 24 years. Actually, I started my teaching career at this beautiful school. So it's wonderful to be back after all those years. And so since doing that, I've worked in a number of schools, leading technology programs in a range of different contexts. My current role has me overseeing our IT technical operational team as well as the pedagogical side as well, and leading our faculty in the technology faculty, which is a broad range of subjects. It includes digital technology, design technology, engineering, STEM subjects, and a range of other courses that we do through there. And as well, working with our library and information services team, which we'll probably get to in a little bit later in the episode when we talk about AI, and making sure we modernise that space and keep it relevant for the new age of research and what that means for our learners.
Well, so you've got a fair amount of knowledge in that technology space. So let's get straight into it. I've read lately about the links between technology like phones and anxiety. In your experience, what do you think most parents are anxious about when it comes to technology?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mel. I think, look, I'm a parent as well. I should have led with that. I'm a parent of 3 kids, 16, 14, and 9, and they all have a very different relationship with technology. And I think what is probably at the forefront of most parents' minds is this impacting my child negatively? And if we just dig down on that a little bit more, at the essence of that is a concern for their child's well-being. That's what we do as parents. We're always worried about their well-being and how they're doing at school or how they're doing socially, emotionally, spiritually. All those things come into play as a parent. And when we see the world of technology and we hear so many stories in the media that where children have been harassed online, bullied online, and it just breaks your heart as a parent. And so, of course, that brings the anxiety and worry about how children are using these devices. So, yeah, look, I look at technology from the well-being perspective as just a part of well-being. And so a number of years ago when I was down in Melbourne, I had a principal say to me, we're not going to talk about digital well-being anymore. And I was a bit shocked because I had digital somewhere in my job title. And I thought, what's that mean for me? And she explained it really well. She said, Brett, it's about the well-being of the child. There's a holistic approach. And so when I was involved in conversations just around the whole well-being of children, it sort of made me realize as a parent that the digital is just a part. And yes, for many kids, it can be a large part of their whole well-being. And for others, it might just be a small part. So I think that's where we need to frame the conversation. We just want the best for our kids and we want to look at their total well-being. Because a child on a phone doom scrolling could be really detrimental to a certain child who may be suffering with anxiety or stress or a family breakdown or other areas of their life, which is just all culminating into this one big pool of issue that maybe is being seen through the way they're engaging with technology.
Well, that is a really good insight into kind of that general idea of well-being, anxiety. And of course, let's drill down into the education technology side of things, because sometimes people kind of put those two things together, maybe the things outside of the school and the things inside of the school. What's your kind of take on educational technology and what do you kind of do in your context?
Sure. So I think I just want to frame this from the perspective that not all screen time is created equal. And it's a nice statement, but when we dig down a little bit deeper, we realise how complex screen time is. There's a wonderful book that I read over the holidays called Unlocked. It's called the subtitle is the Real Science of Screen Time by a psychologist, Dr. Peter Eccles. And what he does is he looks at screen time research as a whole. And it gets a little bit geeky in the whole research side and understanding scientific methodology. And it's one of those books that you just got to read a little bit of and take a bit of a break and think. But what Dr. Eccles does is he unpacks this idea of screen time from different levels of types of screen time. So he talks about passive consumption. He talks about interactive consumption. Talks about obviously communication. That's really important. We use technology to communicate all the time. And he talks about content creation. But it goes a little bit further than that, right? So if we think about passive consumption, that might just be mindlessly scrolling through something or binge watching a TV show on Netflix. If we look at interactive consumption, that could be games and different simulations and online learning. And just between those two, you can see one could really have a strong benefit over the other. Communication, obviously, social networking, picking up the phone. My 9-year-old won't speak on a phone like we would. He has to see his grandfather on the other end. There's that video facial, I need to see grandpa. I can't really speak just without seeing him. And obviously content creation, which I'm sure we'll get to. But if you dig even deeper than that, different type of gaming is even a different kettle of fish, right? So when you and I were growing up, we may have been into video games and we would have gone and saved our pocket money and gone and bought a cartridge and put that game in the computer or in the console. And we would be engaged with that game and you'd have beginning to end playing this game and engaging in a world. I'm thinking of games like Zelda. You're in this fantasy world and you're creating your own little story of walking through this world and capturing and saving the princess and saving the day at the end of the game. But we've moved away from that. And if you dig deeper into perhaps the gaming platforms that we have now, we have these things called micropayments, and it's referred to as like the loot bounties. So now I buy a game, or the game might be free, and I buy this game, and if I want to make my character look different, it'll cost me $1. But I can have 50 different features of my costume for my character for $35, right? But then it gets even more interesting, and it goes, well, every 5th time you buy something, you'll get a lucky prize. And there's some research done in Europe where they were looking at this and going, actually, the patterns we're seeing here could actually lead to problem gambling. It's the same mentality, right? So even in that little area of gaming, we've got a whole heap of different types of issues, but some are perfectly fine and positive, and the imagination that you might come as you're sitting back on holidays playing a game and you just want to save the princess or whatever it is. It's very different to this thing that may have links to like the attitude or the mindset of a gambler. And so we have to be really careful when we just broad brush all of these things. So if we think about something really positive, I mean, I can create content that's uplifting, that tells a powerful story. But as you know, we could create content that's quite harmful and damaging. And so even content creation can have positives and negatives. So I look at it from that perspective of screen time and the different types of screen time, and then think, well, what is it that I want my child doing, or in my case as a teacher, my students doing? And it's always wanting to add something to the world that they've created, to engage in something meaningful and contribute something meaningful. So that content creation is where we focus. Yes, you have to consume information. You have to learn things for a test. There's amazing technologies that can help you remember things or help you understand something. And of course, we'll probably talk about AI in a bit. But I want to see my kids building and creating something. So if I swing that back to parents, for a parent, the key thing I think for this conversation is have conversations with your kids. I want to know what you're doing with the technology, right? I want to know what game is it that you're playing? Tell me about the game, right? Oh, did you think of this, or why? What makes this interesting to you, right? As parents, it's our responsibility to get involved in that. And I'll share a quick little anecdote. I was talking to a dad at our school a year or so ago, and he said to me, my eldest son loves rugby. So I go to the rugby games, I'll cook the sausage sizzle, I'm there with the parents, I sit on the sideline, cheer them on, I know about rugby. He said, but my second son loves video gaming and I don't understand it. And so I challenged him. I said, well, what games does he play? He goes, I don't know. He's just always in front of the screen. So why don't we start by asking the games he's playing? And what it uncovered was his son actually wasn't only playing games, he was actually writing and coding and building games. He had this fascination to try and create his own game. And he said it was fascinating what my son could do. And that conversation opened the door to then having other conversations about, well, I can see the value in this, buddy. It's awesome. I'm really proud of you. But 3 hours is a long time in front of a screen. Let's go for a walk. Well, why don't we have that conversation on the evening walk after dinner about what you've built over the holidays and what you're enjoying about that? So it's just that little window into wanting to know why. Why are you doing this and what is it all about?
Well, can you also unpack for us what happens directly in the education space as well as far as technology is concerned? And we'll come back, we'll swing back around to a bit of a conversation about mobile phones a little bit later on. But in the education space, parents are often wondering, we've got this technology, maybe it's one-to-one technology that's in the classroom. What goes on there?
I'm seeing students create amazing stories and films. I think I looked at your website, your new website here at Emmanuel, and there's a beautiful story there about a girl who's done a documentary on life in India. I mean, that's a powerful use of technology, telling a story that needs to be told. You know, we have a young man, a couple of young lads who've written applications, but they're not just a game for the phone. They're actually deeply thoughtful applications. We've got one young man a couple of years ago wrote an application for his grandfather who's suffering from Parkinson's disease, but it was more so from the carer's point of view and being able to track medication. And so I want to touch on that. How are we doing that then? So how does a 14-year-old have the depth of character and empathy and understanding to do that? Well, we were doing a project with the University of New South Wales, and we had a professor come in and work with our students. And there was no devices in his first session. And he said, I want you to understand how to empathize with a user. And so he taught them the skills of empathy and how to conduct an empathy interview to understand someone. And there's a great book called Reclaiming Our Conversations by, I think it's Dr. Sherry Turkle. And she talks about this art of conversation and how we're seeing a diminishing of it. So I see that as a challenge, right? So I watched Professor Daniel Wu do this work with our students, and they're starting to understand how to empathize. So this young man took those skills, sat with his grandfather to understand Parkinson's disease, because in his mind, I'm going to understand Parkinson's. That's a big problem. And I'm going to solve a problem with an app. Well, that's a big challenge. But through the empathy, right towards the end of his conversation, his grandmother piped in about how she manages the medication and how many tablets there are and all those sorts of things. So he wrote a really simple application to help manage the application and reminders for the medication, because his insights were, it's really important to get the medication at certain times. I learnt that by listening to my grandmother. I understood the impact of it by talking with my grandfather. And from that, he created something great. For this year, we have seen, I teach a year 7 class, first year of high school, and we've taken this learning from developing our digital tech around the design thinking process and really focusing in on developing those strong empathy skills in young people. And our first lesson this year, I showed a story. We looked at a story of a gentleman in Brisbane who's got cerebral palsy, really struggles to communicate. And obviously he has physical challenges. So we watched this film and all about him and the technology he uses to communicate and those sorts of things. And we just sit for a while with that and say, what did you notice? What do you see here? And one, this is a whole class activity. And as a class, a group of students said, it's nice that he can communicate using the computer, but it's a really robotic voice. I'm wondering, and this is where great ideas are born, I'm wondering, how does he communicate with emotion? So we dig a bit deeper on that. What do you think, Sally means by that? So we spend this time understanding that. And so we start prototyping something, a solution for that, a digital solution for that. And we got a prototype as a class using some wonderful AI tools and things like that. That's got a prototype of an application that doesn't just allow the user to say something who's got a verbal problem, can't verbally communicate, but it says it with a certain tone and an emotion attached to it. And the students see the power of, I can solve a problem, right? So we take that to the whole class. Of course, it's done on different levels. Some kids build a prototype and it works and it does something. Some kids build a concept and it doesn't quite get to prototype stage. But we're seeing more and more things come to prototype stage because they've got access to these incredible tools. But we base it on something that's meaningful, that actually aligns with what we want for our students. In the design technology place, we have a wonderful new staff member who joined us, he said to his students, you shouldn't have a phone in your bedroom as an alarm clock. Why don't we build one? So they're 3D printing these incredible alarm clocks. So they've got a microcontroller, and they're coating the microcontroller with a little screen on it, and they're 3D printing the casing. And so everyone's casing is wild and wonderful and a reflection of their personality. And every kid is going home with this alarm clock for their bedroom. Something you'd buy at Kmart for $10, but they're making it. And watching these young people engage in that whole process, they're having a ball. So we're seeing those experiences are achievable for everybody in a cohort, right? But it's that focus on creation, and it's that focus on something meaningful and productive.
It's a very good segue there too, Brett, because at the start of the show, we started talking about parent anxiety, and it's been said recently there's a notable increase in childhood anxiety since the introduction of mobile phones and, by extension, social media. So can you describe your thinking around phones and social media?
I might frame this just from my own parenting experience, as well as what I've seen as a teacher. I think I shared this with you once, Mel. I'm happy to admit that my wife and I, we'd made the decision, which was slightly controversial with peer parents at the time, that we weren't going to allow our son to have a phone until grade 8. Some of his friends had phones in grade 5, grade 6. That was a decision families had made. But we went, year 8. And, we thought that's right. Year 8 will be the year. But we reflected back on that after about 12 months and went, he probably still wasn't ready. Our son, right? Because he's different to your son, your daughter. And we're like, I'm not quite sure that was the best thing. Maybe we probably would have held off a little bit longer. And of course, as happens in families, the eldest probably you try a few things. My daughter, same thing. We said, well, actually, she probably is a little bit more mature than he was at that age, as girls often are. And so my wife and I said, look, we're okay in year 8 for you to have a phone and one social media that your friends are on, but we have access to the password, and if we feel we need to check it, we'll check it. You can make friends on that social network with family and actual friends that you physically see, or family friends that you know, and we'll talk that through. And lo and behold, she actually turned to us and said, I don't want it. I'm like, what? And I'll never forget her saying, she's grade 9 this year, she's turned to me and goes, Dad, there's enough drama at school. Why do I need it offline? Why do I need it when I come home? I kind of get that. Now, the interesting thing with that is that we still have to stay on top of her technology usage because she'll still message. She loves to communicate with her friends. And so it's a constant conversation in our home. Now, interestingly, my son had a natural love of technology. I don't know where he got that from, but he did. And so we actively sought out opportunity for him. And he is one of those students who's writing applications. He's got his own little business now and he's learning the world of business. But we still are on top of it. Like it's not, there's somehow wonderful story that we never have challenges now. We still have to remind him, mate, it's 3 hours. We're going for a walk. Let's go. You can tell me about what you're writing or what you're doing or what you're coding, but we're going for a walk. So yeah, it's this constant to and fro. But my key message, I think, would be know what your kids are doing by asking and showing interest. Just like the father that I gave the example of that loved the fact that he was involved in the rugby club with his son, you've just got to stay engaged and asking those questions.
What would you say to some of those parents that might be thinking, hey, that's a little bit overbearing, Brett, that you know what their messages are, you know all their passwords, aren't you invading their privacy? Yeah,
that's a good point, and that's a constant battle, isn't it? Because I do want them to develop self-regulation. I do want them to have those skills naturally. So my eldest son's 2 years away from perhaps going to university or leaving home or whatever it might be. But the way we phrase it with our kids is if we feel there's a need, we will. So I don't know all the messages my daughter is sending, but if we feel there's a need, we will. And we have had moments like that. She's not going to listen to this, so that's okay. Recently. And my wife was fine. Just pick up the phone and just check in. And it led to a conversation, nothing too serious, but just led to a conversation about how you're feeling and how's that friendship going and all those sorts of things that you work through with kids. Yeah, so they just know that's how it works. We started young because I was dealing with this in schools. I was probably very fortunate. I don't think it was wisdom as much as it was experience, and having to work through these issues as a teacher before I had my own kids at school and supporting other families. So we started young, but I don't think all hope is lost if you haven't started young and you're seeing issues come, because parenting is tough all the way through. You have these different seasons, and you can easily look at the glamorous shots of family Instagrams and everyone on holidays all loving each other and being happy, but not know the truth behind the other challenges that people are having, right? So it's that constant conversation. It's the showing genuine interest in what they're doing, getting excited about it. At the moment. I struggle sometimes, but I do get excited about building. My 9-year-old built in Minecraft.
Sounds very relational in terms of your approach to being able to handle some of these issues. I do have a question for you, though, because I imagine that there's some parents out there going, hey, Brett, that's awesome. That's great. You've got to them when they're younger because you're an educator and you were dealing with this. You know about some of this stuff. But what happens if the ship's already sailed for me? You know, my kids have got involved with this and I feel like I'm losing touch with them. I'm losing control here. What kind of advice can you give parents in that particular space?
Yeah. There's a book I'm reading for some postgraduate study I'm doing at the moment by an author called Margaret Wheatley. It's called Who Do We Choose to Be? And she has this concept in there that she refers to as islands of sanity. Sounds nice. And she's an educational writer. And her concept of islands of sanity are about deliberately creating spaces to do things that are meaningful and get away from the chaos of the world. Like, the world is chaotic. Our kids are growing up in a very busy world. We go from, even if you move technology away and you just watch the news in the morning, you'll have a story about 5 people have been killed in a house fire, tragic grief, and then we'll flip to Fifi the cat who can do circus tricks. There's no space to have empathy, compassion, grief. So Dr. Wheatley talks about deliberately creating these things called islands of sanity. And I think it's right for home as well as schools. I know schools do this really well. So what can I create that gets my child away from whatever the issue is? Is it over-reliance on social media relationships and toxic use of social media? Well, how do I get them away from that? Is it a family holiday that's device-free? How do I role model that as a parent? Like, we have busy jobs and it's easy to pull the phone out at home and check an email or to check up on something, or the phone buzzes and your favorite football team scored a try and you're then engaged and you go off this way. But how do we create role model, these little islands of these times and these places where we're away from that? And what might that look like for our son, our daughter, our family? For us, my wife loves nature walks. My youngest loves bushwalking. That's an island of sanity. That's switch off. Even if that technology is doing something positive and really interesting, it's a switch off. The phone, stay at home, go for a walk, come back. I think if we do those sorts of things regularly, it's a huge help. It doesn't solve the problems of the chaotic world we live in, but I think it does help.
That's a really, really great piece of advice, those islands of sanity. Yeah. I'm definitely going to walk away with that as a little piece of sanity for myself, actually.
That's good.
So, Brett, do you have any final thoughts as we close off the show? Just we've talked about screens, we've talked about social media, mobile phones, technology in the classroom. Any final thoughts, any final advice you'd like to leave our parent community?
Yeah, well, I think we're all on this journey together and we're all learning together. So talk to people, speak to people. You've probably got amazing teachers here with a range of different experiences, and come at these issues from the perspective of well-being, the best for my kid. And when it comes to the learning side, same thing, right? What's the best for their learning? And we didn't touch too much on AI, but I'd say know what technology's out there, critically analyze it, have a deep conversation, think about it. I love audiobooks. And so a lot of these books I've got in my Audible queue. I've got that science book I mentioned around the science of screen time. I've got Reclaiming Conversation, which is really about put the phone away and learn how to have a conversation like you and I are now. And I've got Margaret Wheatley's book, and they all link, but some might say that they actually have and they do, they have some opposing views in certain bits. One would say no phones. One would say, well, we can kind of sort of use them here and here. And I love the wrestling with those ideas. And I think as parents, we need to do that too. Like we can take someone's advice, wrestle with that, get some other advice, wrestle with that, understand our kids' context and bring that back to what we think is going to be best for our kids. And it's just that journey that's never ending and never going. And particularly in the technology world, AI is going to blow our minds, probably already has for many. And I think we need to stay critical, stay excited, and look at opportunities that will come, both for learning and both for, I think, creating things that are meaningful and purposeful and contributing, helping our kids become, people of character that have something really positive to contribute to society.
Well, as always, Brett, you bring some great thought-provoking ideas to the table, and I'm glad our listeners got to join us for the ride. Thanks again for joining us on the podcast today, Brett.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, Mel.
Your School Journey is an initiative of Emmanuel College as part of our commitment to partner with parents in shaping the learning and growth of young people. This podcast is hosted by Mal Gaylor with audio production by John Eddy and executive produced by Dan Pearson. If you found this episode valuable, we'd love you to share it with other parents, subscribe for future episodes, and leave a review. You can also connect with us for more insights into education and to explore how Emmanuel College can support your child's learning journey.